people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, and now it's time for our continued coverage of this past weekend's action, the WBA Super Bantamweight title fight that took place in Argentina between Mayerlin Rivas, the champion, and unbeaten Nazarena Romero, the challenger. The fight's aesthetic, for the most part, was what I expected and what I predicted, though the outcome.
Controversial draw that a lot of people are complaining about.
Fight was stopped in the 5th round due to a clash of heads that caused a cut on the left eye of Nazarena Romero, and the judges' scorecards were tallied. They had it a draw, but if you saw the fight...
Nazarena Romero was the ring general. Nazarena Romero was staying in character, backing Mayerlin Rivas into those ropes.
Mayerlin Rivas unable to hold the center of the ring
and unwilling to engage Nazarena Romero.
As Nazarena Romero proved to be the stronger puncher of the two, and she was getting the better end of those exchanges.
I gave Nazarena the first round.
She applied a lot of pressure in the opening round, landed one or two good right hands, and Mayerlin Rivas, the champion, spent most of that round with her back on the ropes, unable to hold the center of the ring.
Attempting to fend off Nazarena Romero,
who I gave the first round to. In the second round, you saw the reigning champion Mayerlin Rivas open up a little more, try 4 more punches.
Combinations.
Limited success. It was still Nazarena Romero backing off Mayerlin Rivas, who was attempting to box and punch, create space.
Mayerlin, who was coming off a year of inactivity and had a very aggressive game puncher in front of her.
Less than ideal for the champion, but those were the circumstances. Hard to say that Mayerlin really did enough to win that round when most of the eye-catching shots in the round were coming from Nazarena Romero. Even if Mayerlin tried for more shots in the second round,
she didn't get a hell of a lot done, and she still had her back on the ropes most of the round. She's still getting pushed around.
When you see a fighter giving up as much real estate as Mayerlin Rivas was, as often as she was doing it, it's a very thin line between retreating and attempting to set a trap.
Setting a trap.
Trying to, and the ends have to justify the means, to where if you're retreating that much, I hope you're landing punches.
In the second round, the eye-catching punches were coming from Nazarena Romero, not Mayerlin Rivas, so for me, I'm not sure you could give that round to Rivas.
Even if she was letting her hands go a little more, she wasn't getting a hell of a lot done.
Still looked like Nazarena Romero was getting the better end of those exchanges, and she was still the stronger puncher.
Nazarena Romero, the more pocket-sized, pint-sized fighter of the two, the aesthetic, the visual that creates.
And even though Mayerlin Rivas is noticeably taller than Nazarena, she's not bullying her.
It's the other way around, and when Mayerlin would try to open up a little more, put some punches together, Nazarena would effectively fight her off.
Gave round 1 to Nazarena Romero, and even though the second round was a little chippier than the first, I still feel Nazarena took it.
The aesthetic of the match was what you customarily see in a Nazarena Romero fight. It was customarily aggressive, applying a lot of pressure, stringing shots together, and taking chances.
Rivas, the more experienced fighter of the two, was a lot more reserved, moving lateral.
Circling Nazarena Romero, big knockdown in the third round. Mayerlin Rivas visibly hurt. It took her a long time to rise to her feet. She got the full brunt of a big counter right hand from the challenger.
Looked a lot like Nazarena Romero would be able to close the show in the third round, but alas, Mayerlin Rivas, she managed to survive.
Veteran with veteran tactics, though for me and my money, Mayerlin was clearly outgunned.
These are two of the bigger punches in the women's super bantamweight division, though of the two, Nazarena Romero brought the bigger guns to the gun show.
Big power, very big power from a not so big super bantamweight, the more pint-sized fighter in the ring. You will notice, though, that Nazarena's got very big quads.
Not as long and limber as Mayerline Rivas, but she's got noticeably bigger quads, meatier thighs, as they say, and power. Power is drawn from the ground up,
providing a solid base for the fighter to generate destructive power.
Gave the first round to Romero.
Second round swing. Third round to Romero.
In the fourth round, it looked a lot like the reigning champion scored a knockdown.
It looks a lot like Nazarena lost her footing off a punch.
Or a push.
But it wasn't ruled a knockdown. It was ruled a slip.
I'd say rounds 2 and 4 were the better rounds for Mayerline Rivas, even if that wasn't scored a knockdown.
Good defensive highlights from Rivas in that round. Slipping under and around combinations from the challenger. Still very aggressive, still in character.
Mayerline, the champion, didn't spend as much time with her back on the ropes in the fourth round. I think it was one of her better rounds in this fight.
As stated, showed good defensive highlights, evasive maneuvers, moving that head, keeping it off center and out of harm's way.
Made Nazarena Romero miss some big punches.
Gave Mayerline Rivas the fourth round. Nazarena Romero looked to have been winning the fifth round, at least to me.
She went back to applying big pressure, and Mayerline Rivas spent most of that round on the ropes.
It's not really the year mark of being in control of a fight, being the ring general, spending that much time with your back on the ropes unless you're setting a trap.
And the only way it works out the way you set in a trap is if you're walking the other fighter into punches.
Clean punches. In the fifth round, it was Mayerline with her back on the ropes consistently, and it was Nazarena Romero attempting to walk her down.
Fighting for real estate.
Even in moments where Rivas would try to rally and come on with some shots, she'd just end up getting backed up again.
This is the round where the fight got stopped due to a clash of heads that caused a noticeable cut on the eyelid of Nazarena Romero. Bad place for a cut.
Though not uncommon in a boxing match. I mean, so long as the fighters are willing to continue, why stop the fight? Why stop the contest? The peculiar.
It was strange.
You know how it works. If they decide to stop it in the fifth due to a clash of heads, they're going to tally the judges' scorecards in the way the judges had it.
One judge had it for Rivas, one judge had it for Romero, and the other judge had it a draw.
I can't reconcile anybody scoring that fight for Mayerline Rivas, though scoring in and of itself in the sport of boxing is not an exact science.
I can only hope that a rematch will be scheduled between them later on this year, because it was an entertaining fight. It deserves a second run.
And I still favor Nazarena Romero to lift the WBA title from the aging champion, Mayerline Rivas.
Looks to me like she was en route to doing that before the fight got stopped.
I know that fight is on the horizon. I feel like I just got to get past the 24th. I get past the 24th. I do what I do, what I'm supposed to do, execute. I feel like that fight can happen this year. You know, it's there. It's literally there. But I don't want to look over that. You know, I'm looking at Quigley. You know, this is the guy that's stopping me to get into that fight, so I got to handle business.
Comments from Edgar Berlanga, the unbeaten up-and-comer who's under the impression that he may yet get the chance to share the ring with Canelo in September. He's not alone. There are some people out there that believe that as well, that Canelo will forego a Benavidez fight and forego any challenging fights to fight this fighter, Edgar Berlanga, on the back of the Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry, though a fight between them would hardly be a parallel for, say, Oscar De La Hoya versus Felix Trinidad.
Salvador Sanchez, Wilfredo Gomez.
This ain't that. This is far from that. This is miles away from, say, Canelo versus Cotto. I mean, that's more of a Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry in the traditional sense. It's not just any Puerto Rican fighter, any fighter of Puerto Rican descent that lends itself to that age-old rivalry. It takes two fighters of those two nationalities to really build up a fight like that.
Not just one.
Edgar's still wet behind the ears. This guy's a greenhorn. And the last 3 times we saw this guy, he didn't impress.
He's got to know what people are saying. Moreover, he was in the ring.
Does he really feel like he's ready for Canelo Alvarez if he goes in there with Jason Quigley in what is set to be his Matchroom debut, and he looks sensational? Does that really mean that he's ready for the likes of Canelo Alvarez? These two guys
Very different places in their careers, and I feel like that goes without saying. So what's the hierarchy of thought here?
He's willing to sell his O to Canelo Alvarez. That's the hierarchy of thought. When you look at Edgar Berlanga, his limitations so far, how he's been looking, and you look across the landscape, the super middleweight division, guys like Christian Mabili and David Benavidez, David Morrell,
Caleb Plant.
Demetrius Demetrius Andrade, hell, even Diego Pacheco. Which one of those guys would you pick Edgar Berlanga to beat? Where does he stack up with those guys?
This is a guy who could lose his very next fight as soon as you step him up in competition. A bit better than a Jason Quigley. He may yet beat Jason Quigley. But what if he had to share the ring with one of those guys? Does he exhibit the kind of ceiling to where you look at him and say, this could be a champion, a unified champion, or an undisputed champion?
You know the answer. We all do. So how does a guy like this get it in his head that he's ready for a Canelo Alvarez? And the hierarchy of thought is not dissimilar from what we saw with Ryan Garcia ahead of the Gervonta Davis fight. He wanted to have that fight sooner rather than later because he knew that at least commercially, it's a bigger fight than most any other fight that's out there, even if he's not quite ready for it.
Said he's gonna get himself knocked the fuck out.
Ryan Garcia, being younger than Gervonta, he had time on his side. He didn't have to rush into that fight. He could have had 2, 3, maybe even 4 more fights before he shared the ring with that fighter. But because of the size of the fight,
The money.
he wanted it sooner rather than later. I think Edgar Berlanga is of a similar mindset when it comes to Canelo Alvarez.
It's the money that's motivating him. He figures, him and his team, that losing to Canelo, there's no shame in losing to Canelo.
You go in there, maybe you lose to Canelo Alvarez, but you make a fuck ton of money and better losing to him than someone else. Someone that won't get you as big a bag. If I had to guess,
That's what it is. That's why he wants that fight in September. He doesn't actually think he's ready for it. He's just willing to go through with it because the ends justify the means.
I hope that Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Reynoso are not seriously considering Edgar Berlanga as their next opponent in September, though when it comes to them, I've heard very little, if anything, from them about fighting Edgar Berlanga. What we have heard from them is in reference to Dimitri Bivol or David Benavidez. Now we're hearing rumors and rumblings about a potential Badu Jack fight up there at cruiserweight. I'll say that I can get behind the Jack fight a lot more than I can get behind this one.
I can't get behind this. I can't support this.
Pecking order of fights that I would like to see Canelo in September, David Benavidez ranks in at the top of the list. That's the fight that I want the most. Second to that, based on the available options, is a Badu Jack fight.
That fight's a lot more intriguing than this one because it would require Canelo Alvarez to skip past light heavyweight, move all the way up to cruiserweight.
There are perils associated with that. Even if it is for an aging Badu Jack, that's still a Badu Jack that has been campaigning as a cruiserweight for the last 3 years and has had 6 fights so far at that weight. He is acclimated and he's a reigning champion. That, for my money, is more intriguing than this. There is no intrigue associated with Canelo versus Berlanga.
I can't support this.
Matchroom signed Edgar because he can draw a bit in the tri-state area. Being of Puerto Rican descent and there being a large Puerto Rican contingent in the greater New York area, it's understandable why they saw value in him, though they can't be serious about putting him in the ring with Canelo.
It's a pointless endeavor.
Edgar Berlanga likely signed to Matchroom because, well, that's where Canelo Alvarez has been fighting. Signing to them, at least in his mind, brings him closer to that fight.
But I can't forgive that one. I can't excuse it. Canelo better not fight this guy in September. No way.
That's the one fight, the one option that's on the table that is not permissible. It cannot be defended. There is no argument that can be made that excuses Canelo for fighting a guy like this. Though, as stated, I've heard nothing from Canelo himself or Eddie Reynoso, his longtime trainer and manager, that indicates this is a guy they're looking at.
I haven't heard that from them. I've heard it from Edgar.
But not from them. And just in keeping with the theme of all things super middleweight, on the heels of his arduous fight with Sergey Derevyanchenko, Fight Hub reports that Jose Benavidez Sr. called Jaime Munguia during his post-fight press conference, asking Munguia if he would welcome a fight with David Benavidez.
This fight, potentially, would involve 2 separate sets of promotional outfits, the PBC and Golden Boy Promotions, not dissimilar from what we saw in the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis fight. And because that fight happened,
It's at least possible that another fight just like that could, at least in theory, take place. Though negotiations with the PBC are so one-sided, so linear, everything has to happen on their terms.
what's the expectation that Oscar's just going to truck off Jaime Munguia over to Showtime?
Remember that he withdrew him from the negotiations for a Jermall Charlo fight, a more winnable fight, I would say, at least at that time, than this fight would be moving forward, especially based on how Jaime looked with Sergey Derevianchenko, hurt several times throughout the course of that fight. Many strong right hands landed for Sergey.
He went through hell and high water with a very faded Sergey Derevianchenko. What would he look like opposite the ring? David Benavidez, who's still an unbeaten fighter like he is.
They're both pressure guys, Jaime Munguia and David Benavidez. I will say that Jaime, for all his flaws, he is a durable fighter. He can take a punch. David Benavidez, I would say, he's got the better engine of the two.
Even though they're both pressure fighters, they apply pressure differently. Jaime Munguia fights in spurts, bursts.
Whereas the pressure from David, it's more constant. David's got more hand speed than Jaime does.
Slight edge to him.
Neither fighter's resume is all that impressive. Even if Jaime Munguia has a lot more pro bouts than David Benavidez does, there's very little in terms of substance in that resume. I think the best guy that he fought and the best guy that he beat would have to be Liam Smith down there at 154 pounds 3 years ago, maybe 4.
Yeah.
Jaime fought a faded middleweight in Sergey the same way that David Benavidez fought a faded middleweight in David Lemieux. Neither guy's resume has all that much to write home about, but it would be an entertaining fight, a fan-friendly fight between two fighters of Mexican descent. David, seemingly, it would be a fan-friendly fight.
Oh, it'd be a shootout, and you could sell a lot of pay-per-views with this thing. You could put a lot of asses in a lot of seats with Munguia versus Benavidez.
So behind that performance this past weekend, I don't know that Jaime's people would go for that, not straight away. He looked very human with Sergey Derevianchenko, and he's one of the few unbeaten fighters that Golden Boy Promotion still has. There's Jaime Munguia, there's Virgil Ortiz and William Zepeda.
They've still got Ryan.
Even if he's not an unbeaten fighter, I don't know that Golden Boy has enough bodies to spare to where they would gamble Jaime Munguia's opposite the ring David Benavidez, even if the commercial value of the fight.
It's there.
PBC's negotiation tactics are far too linear, far too lopsided to where their expectation might be they'll send over Jaime the same way that they sent over Ryan.
You're expecting them to do that with every fight?
It's not like David Benavidez sold a fuck ton of pay-per-views with Caleb Plant. He didn't. I don't even think that thing cracked 100,000 pay-per-view buys. Jaime Munguia, for all his flaws and all his drawbacks and all the criticisms we have for him, this is a fighter that actually draws well.
He does. You can say what you want, but he sells tickets.
Is it really established that David Benavidez would be the A-side fighter to Jaime Munguia? Is that how this works? Because I'm not sure. Even if you favor him to win, you've got to get through negotiations first before we have a fight. And if you don't, we ain't got nothing.
We ain't got no fight.
David Benavidez is supposed to be taking on Cuba's own David Morrell in the fall. Now that Samson has said they're not going to go ahead with that Canelo Alvarez fight, they have withdrawn their proposed offer.
After it was only on the table for less than a week.
Make of that what you will. He has to make it past David Morrell, who's got a high ceiling but not a lot of pro bouts, not a lot of pro experience.
He's got to beat that guy.
Perhaps if he does, this is a fight that can be built over time, because I do think they could do good business with this thing.
And I'm not proposing that they marinate it. I'm just saying things seldom happen in a jiffy in the sport of boxing.
A fight like this don't get done right away, I can tell you that. Both guys, they're at or around the same age. They've got time.
They're both 26 years old.
Jose Benavidez Sr. has made it his mission to attach his son's name to almost any and every fighter at or around these weights. How many of those fights will actually materialize? Only time can tell.
But this one could sell.
If they made it, I think Benavidez versus Munguia could sell upwards of 500,000 pay-per-view buys, maybe more.
So it's worth thinking over.